When we think of death by car, we usually imagine high-speed collisions or pedestrian accidents. But there are far more subtle and terrifying ways your vehicle can turn against you. First on the list, fuel injectors. Every internal combustion engine relies on a set of injectors to deliver fuel into the cylinders. To get the job done, a small but incredibly powerful pump forces liquid fuel through a microscopic nozzle. Diesel engines are the biggest offenders here. Because they operate at such high compression ratios, they require extreme fuel pressure, anywhere from 20,000 to 40,000 pounds per square inch. The opening on a diesel injector is tiny, usually between 0.10 millimeters and 0.35 millimeters. When fuel is blasted through an orifice that small at such high pressure, it stops behaving like a liquid and starts acting like a supersonic needle. This leads to a medical nightmare known as a high-pressure injection injury. Imagine a mechanic checking a fuel line. A high-pressure discharge hits their finger and pierces through the glove skin, which, by the way, tears at as low as 100 pounds per square inch. At first, it looks like nothing more than a tiny pinprick, something you'd easily shrug off as a minor oops. But within hours, the swelling begins, and the pain becomes unbearable. Because the fuel is moving so fast, it pierces the skin and follows the path of least resistance, tunneling through veins and deep tissue. In some cases, fuel injected into a finger can travel all the way up into the forearm in minutes. Since diesel is a potent solvent, it immediately begins a process called necrosis, literally killing the tissue from the inside out. If it isn't treated immediately, a limb that looked perfectly fine an hour ago may have to be amputated. The damage isn't limited to hands. In one tragic case, a mechanic was struck by a high-pressure blast from a fuel rail that resulted in the loss of a significant portion of his face, including one of his eyes. Next on the list is a scenario that looks completely harmless, but it's one that definitely hurts the married guys the most. Imagine you're working on an engine and you drop your wrench. It slips down into a tight, congested spot. You reach in to grab it, but before you even touch the tool, you smell something, like a backyard barbecue. Then, the pain hits. It's excruciating. You try to yank your hand out, but you're stuck in a cramped space. When you finally break free, your palm is already medium rare, and your wedding ring is glowing molten red, melting straight into your skin and bone. That smell you thought was ham? That was just your hand being tossed on the grill. So, what went wrong? Every car has an alternator to charge the battery, and the positive terminal comes straight from that battery. You might think it's rare for a wrench to perfectly bridge two terminals, but it doesn't have to. See, the entire engine block is grounded. If that wrench touches the positive terminal on the alternator and any other part of the engine at the same time, it completes a short circuit. It's not the electricity itself that fries you, it's the thermal energy. The wrench becomes a heating element instantly. If you're wearing a ring, it joins the party. The metal ring reacts to the induction, or makes direct contact, turning into a red-hot branding iron. Even after you pull your hand away from the engine, that metal is still holding all that heat, continuing to sear through your flesh. As they say, marriage is a till death do us part commitment, but in a garage, that ring might actually speed up the process. It's one of the few times where the wedding ring burns more than the actual marriage itself. It's not just the alternator. The starter motor is even hungrier for power, situated right below the alternator in many cases. In one industrial safety report, a technician was working near the starter solenoid with a long wrench. The tool slipped, bridging the hot battery post to the grounded frame. The resulting arc flash was so hot, it reached temperatures of nearly 35,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hotter than the surface of the sun. The wrench didn't just get hot, it welded itself to the car, and the technician suffered third-degree burns before he could even process what happened. Let's talk about the 12-volt lead-acid battery. Usually, it's a quiet, helpful companion, right up until it decides to turn into a literal IED. It may also leave you with a minimalist face tattoo. A car battery's only real job is to dump a massive amount of current, anywhere from 500 to 1,000 amps, into the starter motor for a few seconds. To put that in perspective, that's about 100 times the current running through your living room's power outlets. It's designed for short bursts. But if a short circuit happens and the battery keeps dumping that power, things get gassy. The chemical reaction inside rapidly produces hydrogen gas. As we know, hydrogen is highly inflammable gas. It burns quickly with an explosion. If that gas builds up and meets even a tiny spark from a loose wire, the battery doesn't just fail, it detonates. If the flying plastic shrapnel doesn't get you, the contents will. The battery is filled with sulfuric acid, which is basically the final boss of liquids you don't want on your skin. It dehydrates your molecular structure. It'll take your skin, your flesh, and even your bones if you give it a few seconds. A battery explosion is a triple threat of misery. You get third-degree thermal burns from the heat, plastic and lead shrapnel embedded in your body, and a sulfuric acid bath that starts dissolving your wounds before you can even get to a sink. One possible upside to all of this is that the force of explosion is such that the lead and carbon, it falls directly on the exposed skin, embeds in it, turning you into an abstract modern artwork. Okay, maybe it just looks like an ugly tattoo ink spray, but it is free, so you cannot complain. I mean, a permanent tattoo in exchange for an old battery that was anyways going to explode is a good deal, especially in this economy. Pop quiz. What's more dangerous? A car with a full tank of gas or one that's almost empty? Believe it or not, the empty one is a ticking time bomb. While liquid gasoline is flammable, gasoline vapors are what actually explode. In July 2025, in Kerala state of India, this science became a tragic reality. A mother and her 3 children got into their old hatchback, which had been sitting unused for months. The car was poorly maintained and had a suspected fuel leak. Because it was the peak of a sweltering summer, that leaked petrol evaporated instantly. Since the car was sitting in a confined space, those invisible fumes pooled inside the cabin and under the hood, turning the vehicle into a literal gas chamber. Witnesses said they smelled petrol right before the ignition turned. The moment the mother cranked the engine, a routine spark from the starter motor acted as a detonator. The car exploded into a ball of flames. The explosion was so violent that the car's central locking system jammed as the wires melted, trapping the family inside. Neighbors managed to pull them out, but the damage was done. 2 of the children, ages 4 and 6, tragically succumbed to their injuries. The mother survived, but suffered critical 3rd-degree burns over 60% of her body. The takeaway? It's rarely the liquid that explodes, it's the fumes. In a confined space, a single cup of evaporated gasoline has the explosive power of several sticks of dynamite. If you ever smell gas when you open your car door, do not turn that key. Open the doors and windows and get away from the car until professional help arrives. Look at this. It's just a harmless looking rubber belt. It sits on the front of your engine, spinning a few pulleys. Unless someone uses it to strangle you, it seems pretty boring, right? Wrong. This belt is the foundation of one of the most gruesome injuries in the shop. Mechanics often have to work in tight spaces, sometimes resting their hands directly on the engine belts or pulleys while inspecting the engine. The danger isn't the belt itself, it's the tension. Imagine a mechanic has his hand on the rail when suddenly a coworker or the car owner accidentally cranks the engine. Within milliseconds, that belt goes from stationary to high-speed rotation. The hand gets dragged along in a sudden jerk. The pulley acts like a dull, high-speed guillotine. Because the belt is under hundreds of pounds of tension, it doesn't just pinch you, it drags your fingers or your palm into the gap between the rubber and the metal. It happens so fast, you don't even have time to scream. The belt either slashes the palm to the bone or simply shears the fingers off entirely. I've personally seen this happen. A mechanic in one workshop I worked at had his thumb completely separated from his hand in a split second. The doctors were actually able to sew it back on, but as he likes to say, the thumb just hasn't been the same since it came back home. It's there, and he's glad to have it, but the nerves are shot and the strength is gone. It was a common injury at my first job because the low-floor buses, the ones that you can see at almost every airport anywhere around the world, usually have their engines situated in the rear. As the bus was about 40 feet long, the mechanic working on the rear and the engine was invisible to the one on front, and many a times, due to negligence of key control guideline, aka proper lockout tagout, someone unknowingly would crank the engine in the front while someone is using the engine timing belt as something to lean on. Meet the coil spring. It's part of your car's suspension, working with the shock absorber to turn road bumps into heat. But don't let its bouncy nature fool you. This thing is a mechanical bomb under thousands of pounds of pressure. A common misconception for rookie mechanics is that once you take the strut off the car, the spring is relaxed. That is a life-altering mistake. Even when it's off the vehicle, the spring is still held in a state of high compression by a single center bolt. If you try to unscrew that top nut without using a specialized spring compressor tool, you aren't disassembling the part. You're pulling the pin on a grenade. The moment that last thread gives way, the spring releases all that stored energy instantly. It's been calculated that a car spring can let go with over 3,000 to 6,000 pounds of force. That's like getting punched by 10 Mike Tysons at the exact same time. In the trade, this is known as the jawbreaker injury. Because of how mechanics lean over their work, the top plate and spring usually shoot straight upward, directly into the mechanic's face. It's as foolish as staring down a cannon while lighting the fuse. We aren't talking about a bruise. We're talking about shattered jawbones, lost teeth, exploded eye sockets, and, in many documented cases, instant death. It can fly through a garage ceiling, or it can fly through your skull. The spring doesn't care which one is in the way. There are countless strut fail videos on YouTube. It is important to mention that even professional spring compressors fail sometimes. which is why you never stand directly over the axis of fire. Next up is a rare but terrifying danger that was literally used as a chemical weapon in World War I. When a mechanic needs to clean a greasy, slimy part, they usually have two choices: acetone or chlorinated degreasers. Acetone works, but it's highly flammable. So if you're planning to weld, grind, or plasma cut that part later, you'll probably reach for the chlorinated stuff because the can says non-flammable. But remember, if flames were the only thing that killed people, penguins would be immortal. That reminds me of the incident when Australians burnt 21 penguins alive while they were trying to kill some weed. The ability of Aussies to F up simple tasks when some kind of flightless bird is involved should be studied. At this point, if a country ever goes to war with them, they just have to send in their air force with the wings removed, and Aussies would find a way to defeat themselves. Enough of the Aussie jokes for now. Let's get back to chemical degreasing agents. We were using a non-flammable chlorinated degreaser because we intended to weld or cut the metal afterward. To ensure safety, we made sure to dry the metal thoroughly once the cleaning was complete. Even if the part looks dry, these chemicals, specifically tetrachloroethylene, sneak into the porous surface of cast iron or the gaps between joints. The moment you start welding or cutting, that extreme heat hits the leftover chemical residue. It doesn't catch fire. Instead, it undergoes a chemical reaction and turns into phosgene gas. Phosgene is an invisible assassin. It famously smells like freshly mown hay. In a stinky garage full of grease, exhaust, and oil, that pleasant smell should be a massive alarm bell. But most people don't notice it until it's too late. Once inhaled, phosgene attacks the delicate membrane where your blood exchanges CO2 for oxygen. Through a process called acylation, it literally pokes holes in your lungs. The holes are too small for red blood cells to pass through, but they are just the right size for plasma, the liquid part of your blood, to leak out. This creates a double kill scenario. 1. Lower blood volume. Your heart struggles to pump because your blood is losing its liquid, becoming thick and sluggish. 2. Internal drowning. Your lungs fill with your own blood plasma, making it impossible to breathe. You aren't just dying, you are literally drowning in your own blood while standing in your garage. The victim dies in absence of prompt medical care. Last on our list is perhaps the most embarrassing way to injure yourself in a garage. Imagine going into the office on Monday with bandages up to your elbows and having to explain that you were burned by a coolant. Yeah, you got scorched by the very thing designed to keep things chilly. What next? Getting paper cut from a safety manual? But these injuries are no joke. Your car's radiator is a heat exchanger. It circulates a water-based coolant through the engine block to soak up the heat. Because the cooling system is a closed circuit, as the temperature rises, the pressure builds. Here's the science. When a liquid is under pressure, its boiling point increases. In a modern car, the coolant can reach temperatures well over 100 degrees Celsius, 212 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes up to 120 degrees Celsius, while remaining a liquid. It is essentially a superheated bomb. The trouble starts when a mechanic, usually in a hurry, decides to pop the radiator cap while the engine is still hot. The moment you crack that seal, the pressure drops to atmospheric levels instantly. Since the liquid is already way past its normal boiling point, it undergoes flash boiling. The liquid turns into steam in a literal heartbeat, expanding in volume and geysering out of the neck. You aren't just getting splashed with hot water, you're being hit by a high-pressure jet of steam and scalding chemical glycol. So be careful next time while you crack a coolant one with the boys. I hope this video shed some light on the hidden dangers of automotive work. Every single illustration and sketch you saw in this video was hand-drawn by me digitally. No AI-generated images were used to bring these stories to life. I do use AI strictly to power the voiceover, but the visual art and research are entirely human-made. Since this is my very first video, your feedback means the world to me. Drop a comment below with your thoughts, your own ideas, or any questions you might have. I'll be down there responding. If you enjoyed the video, hitting the like button and subscribing makes a massive difference for a new channel. You've been watching Renaissance Man. Keep learning, keep questioning, and don't let your cognition go to waste. See you in the next one.